Since long before the internet as we know it today, gamers have been arguing about role-playing games. Everything from which whole system was best to dissecting numerous mechanics, methods, and genres within each game. Back then, people outside of the hobby largely ignored the fights of these gaming nerds, usually never even seeing those actual details at all. But with the popularization of role playing games, largely due to social media and gateway activities like video role playing games and shows with actors pretending to role play, the minutiae of these old debates are now viewed by many who would have never otherwise been exposed to them. This has given rise to the recycled rhetoric of this or that way of playing doesn't matter. It's just a game. There's no right way or wrong way to play. And, quote, if you're having fun, you're doing it completely right. These kinds of reactions are common and curious to me, and what I'd like to address today. As with most arenas requiring sane discourse, the internet made things exceedingly worse, especially with social media, which, down to its algorithmic bones, is geared to maximize and reward junior high Jerry Springer shit flinging. Before we can even address the question, we have to clear the smoke by seeing that so many of these fights are absurd because they are not on the same page, often discussing two, three, or five different games without realizing it. As with any other debate, the first move must be to just take 5 seconds to pause and ask, what the hell are we even talking about? Imagine that we were to argue over something called sports ball, where we include any game with a ball, baseball, football, soccer, as we Yanks call it for some reason, basketball, and so on. Then, like tomcats falling into the same pit in the ground, we start screeching and clawing at each other about the good and bad, right and wrong ways to play this sports ball game. But if we just identify baseball and we all agree on what exactly that refers to, then we've escaped this nebulous and useless sports ball term and zoomed into a specific game with specific goals and means. But when people refer to role playing games, the chance of ambiguity and conflict rises in proportion to the number of people listening. As with all discourse, presuppositions become landmines. Again, none of the confusion over what role-playing games are is new. This problem started not decades, but closer to days after D&D was released into the wild. If you read Peterson's The Elusive Shift, you'll get a good overview of this history. As I've said before, role-playing games are chimeras, the mixing together of older, disparate activities, strategy wargaming, imaginative, other-world exploration, pure make-believe, and so on. The quantitative and qualitative mixture of these many components results in very different experiences and then solidify into what we each call role-playing games. Okay, so we're helped immediately by recognizing this simple problem, and we can head off many disagreements by saying, oh, we're talking about two different things right now. As kids, Americans and Brits discover that the term football is referring to two different games. The quick and easy solution then is to use American football or soccer or British football, and even kids on both sides of the pond understand the difference. It's not so easy with role-playing games. As I said, it evolved from its inception into different directions and yet kept this one term, role-playing games. But there's no universally accepted identifier that helps, like saying soccer or American football. What can we do then? I know of no quick semantic solution that will please everyone. If you wish to engage in discourse about role-playing games outside of your close circles, then you have to give a short description of your activity as you begin those conversations. But we simultaneously need to ask, what are the parameters of this definition? Is Chutes and Ladders role playing? If I play Monopoly and then I quote unquote role play Mr. Thimble, is that the same thing as role playing? If I play solitaire, am I role playing? Is anything under the sun role playing? Obviously not. Logic won't permit it. If everything equals X, then nothing is X. And just quote unquote having fun is too nebulous and fluffy a goal to be of any guiding value. So we have a smorgasbord of activities that are somewhere beneath the role playing game arch. It's some kind of mixture of those aforementioned constituent elements. But I believe it's a lot less complicated than we make it out to be. On an intuitive level, we're justified in saying that role playing games are about, wait for it, playing the role of a different character under a specific structure that is different from all other activities. As I discussed months ago in my episode called the Eudaimonia Role Playing Games, I believe that the highest iteration of role playing games is in doing that in earnest, playing the role of a three-dimensional character in a substantial other world where legitimate free will and cause and effect are permitted. Yes, it includes mechanics as we had in old war games. Yes, there's the ancient activity of make believe. Yes, there's the world development that we see in novel writing and so forth. These constituent parts are there, but with a very specific and intentional outcome, role playing a character. So I feel perfectly justified in using my fleshed out definition for role playing games. With it, we can finally ask the question, can we talk about right and wrong, good and bad ways of playing? And here's where things get stickier. We can all agree that it's absurd to have such debates without clearly defining what exact game is being played. But some will still assert that all such discussions are misguided, even with such clear definitions. And we can observe that many who espouse the no wrong way to play position are not so casual about it. There's an emotional energy at work. What is it? It often sounds something like angry indignation, like, how dare you tell others how to play their games? How dare you judge someone else's silly elf game based on your preferences? Now, I, of course, would never say that an assertion is rendered null by containing emotional components, but it is interesting that it's present and to acknowledge that something deeper than mere game theory is at work in these cases. It's important from the onset to acknowledge that this is bound up with several older, broader topics, and addressing this satisfactorily can't happen quickly if we're to make movement towards a real understanding. Like it or not, this is undeniably seated in philosophical shifts which affect our discourse on art and with our culture's movement over the past 2 to 3 generations towards a radical, absolutized subjectivism and or relativism, where any assertion to a grounded right or wrong is often met with staunch, even vehement resistance. It's likely that this is sometimes merely reactionary and rhetorical, and the people have been so conditioned to talk as if objectivity is passe, and they jump on this bandwagon. It's hard to be sure. But any freshman can point out that this subjectivism or relativism is self contradictory and downright silly. And I won't delve into the madness here, save to say that if you try to even utter the phrase, everything is relative, the sentence itself is self contradictory and meaningless, and you've merely babbled. Before we can zoom back in on role playing games, we have to address broader components, looking at art in general, acknowledging that how each art form is made affects its quality, and that there is such a thing as good and bad art. Anything goes is simply a lie if you're looking for quality. Simple examples elucidate this for us. If one is making a serious movie, say a dark drama with real life themes of pain and loss, like the death of your wife, You don't throw in stereotypical Adam Sandler slapstick fart jokes. If you're writing in the style of Dostoevsky, you don't rescue the protagonist by having little gray men pop in from a saucer and take him on a silly adventure. If you're painting in the realistic style of Courbet, you don't use a crayon and etch some bystanders on the road as a toddler would. If you're composing in the style of Wagner's Ring Cycle, you don't use a ukulele and a banjo and some cheap jingles from a TV commercial. And if you're making a series based on the mastery of Tolkien, you don't make Rings of Power. There are objectively good, bad, superior, and inferior movies. The movie called The Room, which the world is only aware of because the Riff Track guys made fun of it, is objectively abysmal in every way. The writing, directing, acting, cinematography, you name it. All of this is to point out on a common sense level that there are measurable structures to art. They're universal, and the effects are tangible. As an aside, I believe that this confusion of it's all relative, it's all subjective in art lies at the core problem of cinema and TV shows in the 2020s. It's at least worth exploring. I won't delve here into so-called postmodern art.
Postmodern!
That's a mammoth topic that we can keep to the side. Safe to say that in its best iterations, at least, that it's far more about making a statement about art than making any art itself. Honed methods, hard work, and precision are at the heart of all quality productions. Art, games, sports, you name it. Football, rugby, basketball, baseball. Would we look at these and say, it doesn't matter how you play, just have fun? Would you look at the Olympics and say, who cares about all these rules? Just let them do what they want and get rid of all the judges. Imagine someone with the aforementioned indignant response of, how dare you tell them that they're playing it wrong? This would be strange indeed, and yet this is so common when it comes to role-playing game discourse. But as with other arts, role-playing games contain nuance and emotion. This makes it more complicated, but this isn't the same thing as embracing the absolute relativism and subjectivism. Another major component here seems to be the notion that these are just quote unquote silly games, not to be taken seriously in the first place. Again, can you imagine applying that line to the NFL or the Olympics? Remember that these role-playing game debates are ancient, and the details used to be so niche as to be invisible. But now that anyone can see them, I suspect that a large chunk of those who push the who cares, just have fun lines are those who are least invested and least informed as to what serious role-playing games can be like. That conjecture to the side, there's a lingering notion being pushed that none of this is worth sorting through. That role-playing games are just silly games, and they should never be taken seriously, or at least not seriously enough to ever have protracted debates about how they should be played. I'm convicted that this is not only sad, but damaging. Games of real imagination, of what we could call adult make-believe, are an art form with the potential, if done properly, to be profoundly enriching to the human spirit. Degrading all role-playing games to being so trivial that no one should invest energy in clarifying its goals or honing all of the methods and rules to improve it does a real disservice to an art form. Look at the masters of other fields, movie directors like Malick or Lynch or Kubrick, authors like Tolkien and Dostoevsky. Taking their craft seriously opened the door to a rich fulfillment that cannot be otherwise found. Perhaps this temptation of someone who trivializes a specific field leads them to utter the phrase, it doesn't matter how you do it, For example, they're just movies. They're there to let us chill and eat popcorn. Who cares? Or they're just novels. Let everyone live happily ever after. This is woefully misguided. I personally have no interest in basketball, but when I view footage of Michael Jordan in his prime, I see not just an apex athlete, but a graceful master of his craft. I'd never say it doesn't matter how someone plays basketball or the basketball rules don't matter. Just have fun, do what you want. Serious art is water and sunlight for our souls. Games of real imagination, of which I hold role playing games to hold a unique position, can be enriching. And role playing games, just as with all other arts and sports, require specific structures to reach their zenith. There are objective elements mingling with the subjective experiences. This is how art works. Honing our craft in the art of role playing games means taking it seriously enough to pursue excellence, even to the point of having protracted discourse. Just don't bother trying it on Twitter.